Well, now let's talk about The Voice briefly. Noel Pearson was in the studio earlier. Good to meet Noel Pearson. He was here talking to Andrew Clennell. Made a very reasonable case.
Did he?
Talked reasonably, and you know the kind of vitriolic rhetoric that we had a few months ago from members of the Yes campaign, where everybody else was a racist, including Noel Pearson. Everyone was this and that. That seems to have been toned down. But the reason would be, James, because of the polls. So tell us what the polls are telling us, James.
Well, this is really, really interesting because at the end of the week, at the start of the weekend, we had the amazing news that New South Wales, which everybody figured was going to fall into the Yes camp, that is now...
Not us here.
Not on the show.
Not us here. Everybody else, but all those people out there. But you're listening to this show, you know what's going on, and you got the news here. New South Wales also now in the no camp. What does that mean? Well, that means with WA, with Queensland, with New South Wales, assuming they all go no, there is no way the referendum that The Voice gets up. Remember, The Voice needs 4 states and a majority of voters across the country to get up. So according to that, there's no way it's going to get up. South Australia and Tasmania are also really, really dubious for The Voice. And, I think it's really interesting, New South Wales, with a very large immigrant population. I suspect that a large proportion of the immigrant population in New South Wales, being a migrant myself, are a bit dubious about the idea that your rights and your ability to represent yourself to Parliament and to the government depend on your tenure and your family's tenure in this country.
I've always said this entire narrative, this always was, always will be Indigenous land, is a PC way of saying go back to where you came from.
Get lost.
And that is a message that migrants absolutely abhor. Naturally, I'm another migrant.
And pick up on.
Which a lot of white Australians who are sort of drowning in white guilt don't pick up on. I'm going to make a bold prediction here.
Yeah.
I don't think Victoria will pass it.
Good.
I think there is...
Big call.
You know why? Because Victorians are actually hearing opposition. They're actually hearing 2 sides of a debate.
They've never had that for years. Why would that be? Why would that be? Remind me again.
Why
was that?
So I would not be surprised, and I think that's why we're seeing, and we saw just half an hour ago on this station, a very different tone from the Yes camp. They have realised that what they have been putting out there is turning people off. So now they're going with the softly approach. It's all about love and kindness
and this is why it's important for the No campaign not to be complacent.
Yes.
Because
this is right.
We're chatting to Warren Mundine here in the studio shortly, which would be great to have Wazza in here. Sorry, James.
Oh, I was going to say, and it's really interesting to see how there's this whole full court press to rehabilitate characters like Thomas Mayo, who has been, one of the most divisive voices on this. The No campaign has quite rightly and quite fairly pointed out all of the things that Thomas Mayo has said in the past. And now, this morning, the Sydney Morning Herald was out there trying to rehabilitate him like, oh, no, none of that stuff. He said it years ago. Well, he said a couple of years ago, so it's not really like it was 20 years ago. And we're seeing this whole much bigger push here to try and totally soften all of that really divisive rhetoric. And that's going to be the big trick that they're going to try and pull.
It's a huge trick, and people have got to be really aware of what they're up to. But the big news this week, and this is what we'll be talking to Warren Mundine about, a great article by Warren and also a similar article by Janet Albrechtson and also a similar article by Louise Clegg, all pointing out in different ways how the idea that the No campaign, the leaflet, used the arguments of the Yes campaigners like Greg Craven and Thomas Mayo and others. This was demonised by Greg Craven, who got up there and said, this is outrageous that you've used my own arguments against you. These characters seem to forget that that is the essence of democracy. That's what a debate is. The way to win a debate is to use the other side's arguments against them.
But that is
called the way to prove your point, James.
Well, but the thing is that, people like Greg Craven and Megan Davis, who are all, very smart intellectual people, they've all been snookered by their own words on this thing. Yes. And that's why they are so absolutely furious. Because, this is the whole thing. Albanese says, this is the whole thing why the Yes campaign constantly falls over. Is it a modest request, or is it something you're not going to be able to shut up?
They're telling both sides.
the thing. They're
Yeah.
saying both sides depending on what side you're talking to. It reminds me a little bit, frankly, of, you remember the 2019 election campaign when they were saying one thing to miners in Queensland
That's
and
right.
one thing to green-type voters in inner-city Sydney
That
and
didn't
Melbourne.
work so
and
well.
that didn't work out so well either because
Rita?
people have ears on their head.
You know, a side is in deep, deep trouble when they are quoted accurately in context and they object to it.
Yes.
So when your opposition is quoting you accurately and in context, then your arguments are flawed and you are
Exactly.
in trouble. And on being flawed and being in trouble, Julian Leeser, the former Minister for Shadow Minister for Indigenous Australians, who thankfully has been replaced by Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price, who can actually do the job, this week launched an astonishing attack against his own leader, Peter Dutton. This should not be tolerated within the Liberal Party. How much longer are they going to put up with these divisive, bedwetting weaklings who do enormous damage to the party, whatever the issue? You would never find this in Labor. Labor have got some discipline in where they have disagreements. They do not go off to the media to lambast the leader and then keep their job. It is
Well,
I agree with you.
part of the team, or you can go and sit as an independent.
Well, Rita, I'll just say on Julian Leeser, you remember that he sits up in Matt Keane country, up around Hornsby, and I suspect that part of that explains some of his positioning on this. But the final thing I'll say on The Voice and the Yes campaign is there's a rule in politics. If you're explaining, you're losing, and that's where they are right now.